I used to think I was a good driver. Not the kind who revs at red lights or weaves through traffic, but the steady, responsible kind. I'd driven across half the country in beat-up cars that smelled like coffee and wintergreen gum, through snow squalls in Indiana and sun-baked stretches of I-40 where the asphalt felt soft under the tires. My wife, Claire, would fall asleep with her cheek against the window, and I'd turn the radio down and keep us between the lines. It was a small point of pride, like knowing how to fold a fitted sheet or grill chicken without drying it out. I'm careful. I don't mess up the important things. The lie of that sentence didn't reveal itself all at once. It crept in with habits that felt harmless at first. A quick glance at the phone when it buzzed, the reflex to answer a text at a stoplight, the just checking the map move that turned into scrolling for a song. Everyone did it. That's what I told myself. It wasn't like I was downing shots and throwing the car in drive. I was just multitasking, like a modern adult is supposed to. The day of the accident started ordinary. Saturday. Early spring in Ohio, when the trees were thinking about leafing and the air still bit your knuckles if you forgot gloves. Claire took our daughter, Lucy, to a birthday party with a piñata shaped like a shark. I went to pick up a Craigslist lawnmower I'd found 20 minutes across town. The seller messaged me the address with a note about cash only and use the side door. I threw a ratchet set in the trunk, because used lawnmowers come with used bolts, and drove off with coffee in the cup holder and the self-satisfaction of someone who believes he's saving money. Traffic was light. I took the back roads because I liked the way they skim past split-level houses and convenience stores with hand-lettered signs. The sky was that fast-moving gray that promises rain without committing. A playlist shuffled old songs from college. My phone lit up once with a gif from Claire. Lucy blindfolded, swinging wildly at the shark, kids scattering, cupcakes in hand. I laughed out loud in the car. I told myself I'd text back when I parked. I didn't wait. At a four-way intersection near the park, a notification slid across the screen. Reflex more than thought. My hand left the wheel, thumb flicked, eyes dropped. Half a second, maybe a full second, not long enough to matter, I would have said if you'd asked me. The message wasn't even important. Claire's follow-up? She missed it by a mile face with tears of joy, and a burst of confetti emojis. That was when the world tore. There are moments where sound happens with the volume broken. I remember the thud first, a dull, wrong sound like hitting a waterlogged log with a bat. Then a flash of fluorescent yellow. Then the screech of my own brakes becoming a scream. My phone went skittering under the seat, as if it knew it was complicit. A bicycle lay in the crosswalk, twisted, the front wheel bent into a figure eight. The rider, he would have been a cyclist in a news article, but up close he was a person, a man, was on the pavement, a smear of neon and blood. He was moving, not much, a terrible puppet motion that didn't make sense. For a second, I couldn't move. I sat gripping the wheel as if clenching harder would rewind the last 3 seconds. Then something in me unstuck and I was out of the car, knees hitting asphalt, voice saying a word that might have been sir or might have been a prayer. "I'm sorry," I said, like that was a form of first aid. I'm sorry. Someone called 911. A woman in a red hoodie used her coat as a pillow for his head. The man's eyes opened, unfocused, blue and shocked. He said something I couldn't catch. Traffic piled up behind us, impatient horns dying when they saw what we were looking at. The smell of hot rubber braided with rain and iron. I had never wanted so badly to be wrong about time, to erase one decision, slide it back into place, and keep my careful life intact. The paramedics moved with a rhythm that felt both urgent and unhurried. A choreography I wasn't invited to understand. They asked me questions in clipped tones, name, contact, any injuries, and when my mouth couldn't make the right shapes, they moved on. Police lights painted the rain-slick road in pulsing blue. An officer took my license and registration, and I watched my hands hand them over like they belonged to someone else. My phone lay on the floor mat, screen dark. I didn't reach for it. I wanted to put it under a tire and drive. They loaded the man, later I learned his name. Daniel Ortega, 49, a 7th grade science teacher, into the ambulance. His helmet was cracked along the side like a skull in a textbook. The EMT who shut the doors avoided eye contact with me, and I felt something like a verdict land in my chest. At the station, the room had the bored beige of every government building. A poster about seatbelts curled at the edges. The officer across the table asked if I'd been drinking. No. Any drugs? No. Had I been using my phone? I opened my mouth to lie and the lie wouldn't come. It backed up in my throat and turned into salt. Yes, I said. I looked at a text. He wrote that down without sighing, which somehow made it worse. They let me go after the paperwork, but the letting go felt like a trick. I walked out into a dusk that had arrived while I wasn't watching. The temperature had dropped and the rain chose that moment to commit. I stood drenched beside a car that still had a warm hood, hands shaking so hard I couldn't get the key in the lock. When it finally turned, the click sounded like a gavel. Claire met me at the door with eyes I didn't recognize. Lucy was in pajamas on the couch, hair damp from a bath, Shark Piñata winner ribbon crooked on her chest. I wanted to pick her up and pretend the day had been nothing but cake. Instead, I told the truth in the stubbiest version I could shape. I hit a cyclist. I looked at my phone. The words tasted like metal. Is he okay? Claire asked. I don't know. I did know that his blood had been bright, and that bright felt like a bad sign. The hospital allowed visitors only by name. I wasn't family. I sat in our kitchen and clenched a dish towel until the terry loops cut little crescents in my palms. Sometime after midnight, a number I didn't recognize called. A doctor explained terms I knew from TV but didn't want applied to real life. Subdural hematoma, intracranial pressure, emergent surgery. When she said, "We'll update you," I said please like she was a judge, and the "you" included any version of myself that would not have to wake up inside my skin. In the morning, an officer called to tell me it was now an investigation. The word sat in my living room like a third person. My insurance began doing the things insurance does. Assessing, assigning, asking questions that tried to fit a catastrophe into a flowchart. I called a lawyer because that's what the internet said to do, and when he spoke calmly about charging possibilities, the part of me that believes in fairness shrank. It's one thing to read headlines about distracted driving. It's another thing to meet the edges of the law with your own shoulders. 2 days later, the doctor called again. Daniel was alive. They had removed a piece of his skull to relieve pressure. He'd be in the ICU for a while. No promises. Hope fell into my chest so hard it hurt. I wrote a letter to his family and didn't send it. I wrote another and didn't send that one either. What words could cross the distance between my thumb on glass and their life torn open? "I'm sorry" felt like graffiti sprayed on a church. The charge came a week later. Vehicular assault, a felony. My lawyer used phrases like mitigating factors and cooperation. He said my clean record would help, that I had done the right thing by telling the truth. I wanted him to stop saying right thing. There is no right anywhere near what I did. When I finally slept, I dreamed of a neon jacket lying in the road like a fallen sign. In the dream, I always saw it in time. In the dream, I always looked up. Courtrooms smell like polish and breath mints. The judge's bench looked higher than any furniture needs to be. Daniel's family sat 2 rows ahead. His wife with her hair pulled back so tight it must have hurt. A teenage boy whose jaw was set like a door you can't open. I sat behind my own lawyer, hands clasped hard enough to make the knuckles ache. Claire sat beside me, our knees touching, a small anchor I didn't deserve. The prosecutor read the facts in a voice that treated facts like they were jars on a shelf. Crosswalk, right of way, defendant admitted to looking at phone. Speed estimated at 28. Contact point consistent with. The words stacked like bricks around me until I couldn't lift my head. When they asked if I wanted to speak, I stood and made it halfway to the small lectern before my knees shook. I said the only true thing I had, that I was sorry, that I would trade every comfort I owned to rewind 3 seconds, that I didn't expect forgiveness. I looked at Daniel's wife when I said it. She didn't look back. If I were her, I wouldn't have either. The judge sentenced me to 90 days in county jail, 2 years probation, community service, a fine, mandatory safe driving classes, and this was the part that clawed at my ribs, 2 years without a driver's license. 90 days felt like a cliff I could see the bottom of. 2 years felt like a horizon that had moved farther away. County didn't look like TV. It looked like boredom weaponized. Lights on at 5. Lights off at 10. Beans on Tuesday that tasted like Monday. A concrete room where time got heavy and sagged like a wet shirt. I kept my head down. I read paperbacks with cracked spines. I worked in the laundry room and learned the small mercies of warm cloth. When Claire visited, we pressed palms to glass. Lucy drew pictures and held them up. In one, she had drawn 3 stick figures holding hands under a lopsided sun. "That's the park," she said through the phone. "We'll go when you get out." I counted weeks with pen hash marks on the cardboard of my commissary box. I counted the ways I'd lashed my life to a device like it was an extra organ. I promised things in the quiet that sounded like vows. No phone in the front seat, ever. No texts at red lights. No playlist worth a life. Back home, the punishment kept going. No license meant learning bus schedules, asking for rides, pedaling an old bike to work in whether that didn't care what I'd done. It was humbling in the granular way that changes the texture of your days. Asking a neighbor if I could put cash in his gas tank. Leaving the house 40 minutes early for a commute that used to take 12. Planning my daughter's dental appointments around a transit app that lied sometimes. Community service was at a trauma center where the coordinator must have recognized some edge in me that needed sanding. She put me in linens and then, once she saw I showed up on time, kept my mouth shut and folded sheets with care, let me help restock the family waiting room. I learned the symbolism of styrofoam cups and warm coffee. I learned to say, "Can I get you anything?" without feeling like I was trespassing. On Tuesdays, a grief group met in a room off the corridor. I stood in the doorway once too long, heard a woman say, "The only thing worse than losing him is pretending I didn't." And I had to go to the men's room and sit on a closed toilet lid and breathe until the edges of the floor stopped moving. My lawyer suggested a letter to Daniel's family through the victim advocate. I wrote 10 and sent the 11th. I didn't ask anything. I didn't use the word accident. I wrote the date and time. I wrote, "I did this," because using any other subject would have been another kind of crime. Months turned. I learned that punishment isn't a chapter. It's a climate you adapt to if you want to go on living. The day I got my license back, I sat in the DMV parking lot for 10 minutes with the engine off. The new card looked too clean in my hand. The old reflex twitched in my pocket. The ghost buzz of a phone I don't keep in my front pants anymore. I moved it to the trunk when I drive now, zipped in a bag behind the spare tire. People laugh when I say that. I don't care. I have earned their laughter the way a scar earns stares. I asked the trauma center if I could keep volunteering. They said yes. On Wednesday nights after Lucy's in bed, I fold blankets for the ER and keep the coffee fresh in the family room. Sometimes I sit with people who don't want to be alone but don't want to be talked to either. We face the TV and pretend to watch a game, letting the score fill the space. A father once said, "It helps to know you're here." He didn't know anything about me. It didn't matter. A year after the crash, the victim advocate called and asked if I would consider participating in a restorative justice meeting. Daniel's wife had agreed. The air left my lungs and then came back in little sips. I said yes before my fear had a chance to say no. We met in a room with soft chairs that tried too hard. The facilitator set the rules. Speak from the eye, no interruptions, we can pause. Daniel's wife, Elena, sat with her hands folded in her lap the way my mother does in church. Her son, Matteo, taller than me now, took a seat to her right. They looked like family photographs in a frame you're not supposed to touch. "I don't want to hear excuses," Elena said first, her voice even. "I just want to know why." I had practiced answers about habit and culture and dopamine loops. None of them fit in my mouth. "Because I chose to look," I said. "Because something unimportant felt important. Because I was wrong." She nodded once, emotion with its own integrity. Then she told me about the morning routine that had reordered itself around physical therapy and headaches. How the bike hung mute in the garage now. How their kitchen had become a geography of pill bottles. She told me about a man who loved 7th graders because they are still raw, who tutored after school without charging, who collected bad puns like baseball cards. She told me about the sound one shoe makes when it has to stop for the other. Matteo stared at the carpet, then at me. "Sometimes I hate you," he said, not loud. And sometimes I forget for an hour and then I feel guilty for forgetting. I said the only thing I could say that didn't trespass. I hear you. I did not ask for anything from his sentence. We sat like that for an hour, time sliced into pieces that didn't resemble any other hour in my life. When it ended, Elena stood. She didn't forgive me. She held out a photograph of Daniel in a ridiculous Hawaiian shirt, grinning, a lei crooked on his neck. He wasn't a headline, she said. He was this. I will carry him, I said, and meant it the way people mean amen. Now, when I drive, Claire sits in the passenger seat with her phone, and I ask her to be my hands if something buzzes. Lucy is 12 and rolls her eyes when I make her put her backpack in the trunk, so I won't be tempted by the little chirps from her friends. I am not negotiating with temptation anymore. I am arranging my life like a room with the trip hazards put away. Sometimes I ride a bike. I bought a used one from a guy who cried when I told him why I wanted it. I wear a neon jacket and stop at every crosswalk and put a hand out the way cyclists do when they thank you for not killing them. The first time I rode past the intersection, I pulled over and put my head on the handlebar and sobbed into the fabric like it could absorb anything bigger than sweat. I can't put the world back the way it was. Making amends sounds like sewing, like straight lines and neat stitches. What I do looks more like mending. Ugly thread, visible knots, seams that remember where they split. I show up. I choose boredom over risk. I let the song keep playing even if it's the wrong song. I keep Daniel's photo, Hawaiian shirt and all, tucked behind my registration. When the officer who pulled me over last month for rolling a right turn asked for my papers, the picture slid out. He handed it back without comment. I said, "Thank you," and we both knew I meant more than the paper. I used to think I was a good driver. Now I think I am a careful person trying to deserve the privilege of being near other people with a machine. That's smaller than goodness. It's also real. If you're reading this and you think you're the exception, that your eyes are quick and your thumbs are responsible, listen to a man who knows what 3 seconds can do. Put the phone away. Put it in the trunk. Let the text wait. No GIF is worth a life. I checked. I know.